Soloable MMO. Solo players save the genre. Um, I don't know if they saved the genre, because I think even without solo players, some MMOs would have always thrived, like Albion, RuneScape, uh, WoW, I guess, Final Fantasy. Like big MMOs have already kind of cemented themselves, but I think they saved new MMOs releasing. Because if you took away the solo players, like I don't think a lot of those previous MMO players would play the new ones. If I'm going to be perfectly honest. Well, let's take a look.
Hey guys, it's Lucky here, and today we're going to talk about something interesting. I'm making this video because I realized something. Most of us are loners. Most of us don't have someone to play our favorite MMO with when we log
Yeah, I would agree with that. Bit sad, but yeah.
in every day, but we keep coming back in spite of that. And even if we do have someone to play with, sometimes we just want to play alone. Take a look at Asmongold, who started his YouTube channel 8 years ago, teaching people how to solo group content.
What's up, y'all? It's your boy Asmongold. I'm going to show y'all how to solo Conclave and win. What's up, y'all? It's your boy Asmongold, and today we're continuing the series on how to solo Glory of the Cataclysm Hero. What's up, y'all?
Yeah, solo videos, or videos of people soloing things that are meant for groups have always been like really, really big.
It's your boy Asmongold, and today I'm going to show y'all how to solo Whispersmore as a warrior.
And even those of us that do have friends have a hard time agreeing with those friends on what MMO to play and when, resulting on the people that do have friends also playing MMOs alone. This was made more apparent than ever when I tossed up a video on YouTube about MMOs that you can play alone or without friends, and it absolutely blew up. You guys devoured this thing, shedding some light on the fact that, hey, a lot of us spend most of our time playing MMOs solo, and we recognize that. MMORPGs are more and more turning into RPGs that happen to be online. Is it the developers implementing it, or...
I mean, that's kind of always sort of been the case. I'm trying to think of an MMO where you couldn't play solo. I don't think there is one. Or it's just like, it's not even an option, you know what I mean? So it's like, and I think that's where the MMOs even like kind of grew up from to begin with. It was just RPGs and people wanting to play those RPGs with their friends.
Or is it us demanding it? Why is it that most players...
Like it went from single player games to like multiplayer, like the old school Phantasy Star games, or like can't really think of other ones off the top of my head, but I know there's like a few of them, or like Gauntlet, stuff like that, where it's like an RPG with multiplayer in it, and that just evolved into MMOs.
Today log into their massively multiplayer game and spend the majority of their time playing alone. These are all interesting questions, but perhaps the most interesting question of all is it ruining the genre? Is the fact that MMOs are becoming more and more of a solo experience contributing to the decline of the genre? I'm gonna
That doesn't even make sense, because that's where it came from.
try to answer all of those questions today. In the early days of the MMO genre, you needed a group for just about everything, and even if you could...
No. I mean, it definitely helped, but there was a lot of like glitchy, not glitchy, but like players really, what's what I'm looking for? I'm drawing a blank here. What is it? They always played MMOs, or at least a lot of people who played like MMOs back in the day, including myself, looked for ways to solo. Like, yes, I had people who I played with, but I would try to cheese the system to solo things.
Would solo something, getting a group was generally a lot faster and more efficient. If you played an MMO back in the early 2000s, you probably had a pretty tight-knit circle, or at least a guild that you spent a lot of time with. You probably even remember a lot of those players today. They were people that became not just online acquaintances, but actual friends that you logged into the game for and grouped up with and ran through content together. It was just part of the game, and it was just what you did. And if you didn't, well, you wouldn't be getting a whole lot done, and you'd probably...
Yeah, you would.
Except players didn't quit. MMOs were never more popular than they were when they were forcing introverts to join guilds and...
No, I think you're confusing stuff. There was a lot of solo players back then as well. They, at least some of the friends I played with, that didn't really like doing raids with the guild. They were in the guild, yes, but they didn't really like doing raids. They would either do sometimes dungeons for fun, but a lot of them were like into gathering materials and selling them. So it's like they played solo, but you know, they still talk to people in the game. So I mean, unless you're talking about that part of it being multiplayer, which I wouldn't, because that's no different than like a Discord chat. And calling Discord an MMO would be ridiculous.
Get things done when MMOs were hard instead of easy. But today, the most popular MMOs seem to be designed around the player that is not interested in joining guilds, around the player that doesn't want to challenge in their questing experience. Dungeon finders, raid finders, not to mention the fastest way to
There's nothing wrong with a challenge in the leveling. The problem is if challenge equates to more time for the same thing. Like, how do I explain this? Like, for the leveling in WoW, a lot of people like killing those rare elites, even though they're tougher. It's because they reward about the same experience as a normal quest that would take longer. So it's a harder thing, but it rewards more experience for the time spent. So that's the thing you gotta remember, is that people don't care about the challenge. Like, people will do the challenge, a lot of them will, if the reward is worth it.
level is usually what? It's the main story quest, which is almost entirely a solo experience carved straight through the MMO. We are at a point now where it's often less productive and less efficient to play.
Like with Final Fantasy's main story, the reason why a lot of that's easy is because it's mandatory. There is no choosing to do something else. So if you're going to have something that's absolutely mandatory, you have to have it where the lowest IQ can do it. Like, honestly, I don't think it should be mandatory to do Final Fantasy's main quests. I don't think it should be. I think if you want to do it, you should want to do it because it's good, not because the game forces you. But that's just me. Or at least, what's the word I'm looking for? I think there's a lot of baby, what are you doing, girl? Quests in the main story in Final Fantasy that are just filler, that the game never needed. That is also required. So, I don't know. Like, I think it makes sense to do the story in Final Fantasy, but just so you know the characters and stuff. But a lot of those quests are just kind of pointless.
Play our massively multiplayer games.
Should have been side
with
quests
other
instead.
Players. Grouping up used to be the fastest way to level, if not the only way to level. Battles were difficult, and it wasn't uncommon for there to be significant penalties for dying. You were all in it together. You actually needed each other, and every role in the group was incredibly important as a result.
Not really. Every role was important. No, there's two roles that are important: healer and tank. As long as you're not hitting the enrage timer, like, DPS don't matter.
There was always a lot on the line, creating a lot of moments to bond with the players around you. If you survived that sketchy pull or managed to take the boss down, you'd celebrate. I still remember waiting for high-level healers to come res me in games like Lineage 2 to get hours of my experience back when we had died and lost it on death. I also remember...
I was just about to say, I was like, you liked that? Like, that was a plus? Like, that's awful. Like, I hated that. I hate losing experience on death. So I played, what was it, Final Fantasy 11? I think that's the previous MMO to 14.
Remember actually having to use crowd control abilities to survive when someone...
Oh, that was actually my first MMO that I ever played, so I wasn't good or knew how to do it. Like, tried doing things solo and just got crushed. Like, I mean, I could technically do it, but it's like, it's a huge waste of time.
And the group tab targeted the wrong enemy by accident.
I miscalculated.
Everyone needed to be present and give it their all. But not just that, there was an incentive to bond with those players. There was an incentive to perform at your best. If you...
An incentive to bond with them? I don't think so. I mean, there's an incentive to work on your teamwork. But I don't know what incentive to bond he's talking about, other than maybe just that would naturally lead to getting better teamwork. Maybe.
You had a tank with clean pulls that could maintain aggro, or a healer that kept everyone standing. That was special. You remembered those players. You added them as friends, because that's the only way you would make sure you had a group to do that stuff with the next day. There wasn't a dungeon finder that you could queue into while watching Netflix and YouTube. You had to be social and you had to try. But
nope, he is absolutely wrong there. Maybe that's how he played it, but plenty of people did randos all the time, where you're just looking for a group in chat. And you just joined random people. Sometimes you would add them as your friends, like you said, if they were good, but it wasn't because you wouldn't be able to find people. It's more like you found people who wouldn't waste your time. So it's really just that. It's not that you thought they were cool most of the time. it was like, oh, he knows how to heal, he knows how to DPS, he knows how to tank, whatever. You know what I mean? But it wasn't to make sure you had a group, it was to make sure you weren't wasting your time with some crappy group, which is rare nowadays because most MMO players who do those dungeons actually know what they're doing. Because it's not that hard, to be fair.
Don't get me wrong, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. If you think Tinder is hard on average looking nerds today, you should try being an average damage dealing DPS in the early 2000s. When tanks and healers logged into the game, they got swiped right on more than supermodels on Tinder. They were instantly messaged by desperate damage dealers begging for a group so they could actually leave town. But just like on Tinder, those tanks and healers swiped left on almost all those requests. They were already spoken for. They had already fallen into a static group. Desperate damage dealers had already locked them down. It was the best time to be a tank and a healer, and probably the worst time to be a damage dealer.
That's kind of still the case. You get into groups much quicker as a healer and tank than you do as a DPS. It hasn't really changed. The auto queuing has helped with it, but
man, when you found that click, a group that you look forward to logging in with and playing with every day, it was special. You'd shoot the breeze in comms while grinding through a dungeon until late in the night, knowing you'd all log back in the next day and maybe try out that new leveling spot or that new dungeon that you were all finally high enough level to.
What the heck? New leveling spot? You needed a group for that new leveling spot? I've never had that. I don't know. Like, maybe if there was interesting ones like how Vanilla WoW had some of those elite places just to check them out. But even then, it wasn't like, I don't know. I didn't really get groups for stuff until like endgame. So, like maybe one or two friends, but not like a full group.
Do. But on the flip side, while some players were in that group making those memories, there were plenty of other players signing in just to realize they weren't going to get a group in time for it to be worth it, and they'd sign back out again after trying for sometimes hours. In other words, players were spending as much time looking for a group as they were being in a group. I remember standing in town looking for groups in Aiden and Lineage 2 or in Juno in Final Fantasy.
That still happens in even today's thing, like for example with solo queue shuffle, the arena PvP that they have in WoW. Like DPS, like I tried it on my DPS, it was like a 25-minute queue, and then when I went on my healer, it was literally like 2 minutes. It was crazy.
Fantasy 11. I was a DPS in both games, and there were a lot of nights where I didn't get a group because I signed on too late due to school or work or life. And while I miss the camaraderie that came with forcing everyone to play together all the time, I don't miss that part of it. And even if you were one of the lucky ones that managed to form a static group, it only lasted so long. One person would level too fast, or one would level too slow, or one would go full Leroy Jenkins. And your odds of playing together the next day weren't great. But I'd take those odds right now because at the moment, indicators are suggesting that a recession is on the way, which brings me to the sponsor of today's video, Masterworks. Jamie.
I know he did this as a segue to his ad, but it's like, that didn't even make sense.
Downey,
okay.
the CEO of JP Morgan, said that what's coming could be worse than a recession. So what are experts doing to prepare? They're following recently released guidance from BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, who says that a normal portfolio of stocks and bonds won't cut it anymore. For 2022 and beyond, BlackRock recommends diversifying with alternative assets. And of all the alternatives out there, only one was personally recommended by BlackRock CEO Larry Fink: contemporary art. Probably because contemporary art has outpaced the S&P 500 for the last 25 years by more than double, and it appreciates more than gold, real estate, and the S&P when inflation is high, at a whopping 33% annually. Repeating, of course. That's why I've partnered with Masterworks, because they're helping you secure your financial future by offering investments in the same contemporary art. This is not NFTs. This is fractional shares of actual paintings by legends like Picasso and Banksy. When Masterworks sells the paintings that you are invested in, you get a potential return. And the 6 paintings that they've sold so far have averaged a 29% net annual return, even through COVID, a bear market, and record high inflation. Now, of course, past performance is no guarantee of future results, but I think this is absolutely an option to consider when diversifying your portfolio. With inflation still crazy high and stocks still crazy low, Masterworks is seeing a record demand, but you can skip the waitlist by clicking the link down in the description below. Thanks for listening, and let's get back to it. Okay, so like I was saying, it's nearly impossible for a group of people to sync their lives together in a way that would allow them to progress through an MMO at the exact same speed. And even if you did have a static group,
well, the thing is, you don't have to be at the exact same speed. Everyone, like hitting the max level in most MMOs is not a big deal. Some of the more insanely grinding ones, that may be a big deal. Like, I think MapleStory and BDO. But other than that, like, that's not really a big issue for like 90% of
and
MMOs.
you were committed to staying in that static group. There would be days where you couldn't play because that meant you would outlevel the people in the group. And there's the rub. That's the reason that MMOs focused on having a solid single
I
player
don't think so.
experience began their rise to dominance. If the MMO had
Or maybe Lineage is like that. I never played Lineage.
a
So.
fleshed out enough solo experience, you always had something to do. If your friends weren't on, or if you didn't have any to begin with, you could still make great progress in the game. And this was a welcome change. And more than ever before, we're seeing MMOs focus on the solo experience.
I mean, it's like I said, that's how MMOs came about, is it came from RPGs that became multiplayer RPGs that evolved into MMORPGs. It's not like MMOs came before the RPG.
Away from early on in their development. Here's a clip from the recent Ashes of Creation developer update.
Ashes of Creation is looking to fulfill both that solo-oriented mind in gameplay, as well as the group and social experience.
WoW kind of started this, in my opinion. It had a very casual questing experience that would take you all the way through most of the game, but initially it lacked the Dungeon Finder. Later on, toward the end of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, the Dungeon Finder was finally added. No longer were we walking to dungeons and forming groups in zone chat. We are now queued into an instance and tossed into a group that may or may not acknowledge each other's existence in group chat. We successfully
That was the case also. There was plenty of times before the Dungeon Fighter came out that you would not even talk in group chat. Just, I really find it weird that a lot of these people who claim to play the game back then think that it was different. It wasn't. It was very much the same.
got rid of.
I mean, it's probably worse now, but I think that's overall like an MMO player thing versus the mechanic itself affecting it. Because you get it too when you're doing like world quests or like just questing out in the world and you run into people. Just people less sociable now than they used to be.
The boring hours of standing around looking for a group, but we also successfully got rid of a ton of social interaction in the process. You don't need
a ton of interaction, looking for a group, DPS, warrior, or if you want to put your class in, looking for group healer, looking for 3 members, looking for 2 members. Oh, there's so much interaction we lost. It's terrible.
To make friends. You can just queue up for a dungeon when you want to, on your schedule. It didn't matter if you were great at the game or
that was always the case. I have no idea what he's talking about. Like I said, I think he's like getting this info from like Lineage. Even though he's showing WoW, WoW was not like that, or at least not my server. Like obviously I'm speaking from my own personal experience, so it's just even the people, my friends and family who played it, never really like I don't know. It's just weird.
You'd get tossed into a group all the same. There was a lot less social accountability. One inevitable downside to this, dungeon content began to be designed for these types of groups. Random groups of strangers were more prone to giving up on a group as soon as it was apparent it wasn't going to be a smooth dungeon experience. They knew.
Yeah, dude, they do that like even with Mythic, and Mythic doesn't really have a dungeon fighter that I know of. Maybe it does. If it does, I don't use it. I'm talking about like beyond the normal Mythic, like Mythic 0. But like Mythic, like in the higher levels of Mythic, like if you invite someone in who isn't a part of your static, and they're not doing so well, kick them. Like, why are you wasting your time?
Knew they could simply queue up for a dungeon group later, and as a result, commitment to the group was lacking, and you couldn't have content.
Or actually, it's usually the case where if they feel like the group is bad, that person will just leave.
As difficult as you used to, people just wouldn't stick around through the wipes. The solution was to make dungeon content easier. When's the last time you used a CC ability on an ad? No way. You pull that bad boy in and melt it down with everything else. Relying on players to CC mobs was tedious. It required communication. Cleaving it all down was
okay, so this is why I think his argument is just out the window. Is Final Fantasy is even worse than WoW when it comes to this. Like with Final Fantasy, you literally, as a tank, are going to grab everything and run to the boss and then AoE everything down. Or just before the boss. Like you'll get to the boss, and just before you enter the boss room, you just AoE everything there. And that's like across almost all dungeons that I remember playing. So it's like, and yet it's one of the most social MMOs out there. So yeah, that's just, and it's the same thing. With Final Fantasy is that very few people actually speak in dungeons, but it's like it makes sense though. You're there for a reason, It's not to make like friends, I guess. I mean, you're playing a game, but you're there to get loot, you're there to level, whatever it may be. And if there's people making that more difficult because they suck, like, it's just how it is. Like, you just want to get it done and over with. Like, there are, there should be other things to make friends with. Like, that to me is like what raiding is for. Getting a guild, just not doing random pugs. Like, I don't know.
Easy. Everyone could be on the same page without even having to talk to each other. And I see this in almost every MMO. Dungeons are generally pretty easy. They generally don't require a lot of communication, and as a result, they often end up being pretty forgettable. You romp through it, you melt everything inside, and then you forget the people and the content that you experience. It'd now be fair to describe most MMORPGs as single-player games, with some group content tacked onto the side. All of the biggest MMOs like Final Fantasy XIV, ESO, Guild Wars 2, World of Warcraft, they've all got tons and tons of solo content for you to do when you log in. Oftentimes, they have way more solo content than they do group content, and they've succeeded all the more for it. Players have spoken silently and with their wallets. They gravitate towards the MMOs with a fleshed out solo experience. They want the option to group up on their schedule and not somebody else's, and sometimes they want the option to not have to group up at all. So this
Yeah, that's always been the case. More options is better.
begs the question, why play MMOs at all if you're the person that doesn't want to interact with anyone at all? And it's a fair question.
It's not a fair question. Because by that logic, every MMO player out there should be playing League of Legends. Because that game will... There is no single player in League of Legends. Or at least not like the ranked stuff. So it's like, if that's all you cared about was the social experience working with the people in your group, why are you playing an MMO? Why aren't you playing League of Legends, Valorant? Those kind of games that are all about teamwork. Like, yes, maybe if you get good enough, you can solo some things, but... Or, you know, like... You can carry the team, but at the same time, like, that's what I mean. Like, it's just not a good argument. Like, if you don't want to be social while you're playing an MMO, that's like, I don't know, that's just kind of mind-boggling to me. It's like, or if you don't like story while you're playing an MMORPG, on an MMO survival game, it's like, okay, but I like things in this MMORPG other than that. Like, it's just a weird argument to make.
But I think it's the fact that MMOs are an unending story. They're not just about interacting.
Oh no, they're ending. They're definitely an ending story. Whenever you quit that MMO, that's the end of the story.
With other people, they are about the journey, the days, the weeks, the months that we put into them. They'll be relevant for years. It always feels bad when you're watching a good show and you go to put on the next season only to find out there isn't one. The show got canceled years ago. Or
dude, that's gonna be MMOs. Like, eventually they will close, or they'll release like a newer version of them, I would assume. If they're... I won't say eventually, because who knows? Like, no one knows the future. But let's be fair, like, there will come a time where the graphics, like the people who are playing like EverQuest and stuff like that, like, they're mostly people who played it back when it was relevant. And when those people pass away, what's going to happen to the game?
Or maybe this calls
because it doesn't really have a lot of appeal to like a new generation.
For a more direct comparison, such as when you're enjoying a single player game and you have an epic fight and you get that bittersweet feeling because you know a final battle when you see one. It's epic, it gives closure, and you're completely aware of the fact that you're likely only a few lines of dialogue and maybe a cutscene away from putting the game down forever. The character you're leveling up, the skills you unlock, the cool cosmetics you found, you'll never see them again, nor will anyone else. You beat the game and you'll probably never boot it up. It's a conflicting moment of wow, that was amazing, and damn, it's over. And
I don't really ever run into those moments. I'm like, it just ends at wow, that was amazing. Like Elden Ring. Like, to me, there is no bitter feeling other than, oh, I really wish there was more. Like, other than that, but that's like just in general. Like, I would like, you ate something really good and you want a bit more of it. Like, that's all that is. But it's not a case where it's like you feel like, oh, I just wasted my time.
And that's where MMORPGs come in. They don't end, or at least you hope they won't anytime soon. You don't have to walk away from the story and the character in the...
See, I don't think it's the fact that it's ending. I think it's the shared world part. Like, where you can run into people, they can see you with your gear. Like, I honestly think it's not.
hero you leveled, you'll be jumping back onto it in the next expansion. There's also the fact that playing alone isn't always a conscious choice. It's not always a decision made through social anxiety. Sometimes it just happens that way. I don't consider myself a solo MMO player, but if I look back at my recent experiences in MMOs, I have a lot of time spent playing solo. It wasn't even a conscious decision I made, but my schedule fell out of sync with the people I tended to group with. I played the MMO for half the day and then maybe went.
Yeah, that or if you move to another MMO, you pretty much lose all the friends that you had on that previous one. Because obviously, hard to get someone to play a new MMO with you
to work on a YouTube video. The next day, they were levels ahead of me, and it didn't
if
make
they're
sense
still
to
in the old
group.
one.
Or on the flip side, I'd be the one degenning the MMO the way we MMO players sometimes do, and someone in the group would have work, a new girlfriend, a new kid, or school, and they'd fall out of sync. And there's one critical problem that's arisen with the new progression rates of MMOs today. Even though you're only a day or two behind your friends, you might as well be on a different server while you're leveling up. They're working on different dungeons, different zones, and they're grabbing different materials, and while of course completing completely different quests. Fortunately, once you hit max level, that problem mostly tends to fade away, but you have to get to max level first, and so few players do these days. Look at New Worlds, look at Lost Ark.
Is that true? Does he have numbers to back this up? New World, I would agree, only because New World's middle leveling, like past 30, towards the end of like the max level, was really, really bad. It was boring, it was freaking grindy, tedious, so that makes a lot of sense on why people didn't hit max level. But Lost Ark was easy to hit max level. It was just getting the honing up, like getting your honing level like to your friends was the issue. Because some friends would pay money or they would just get plain lucky.
This is why it's so critical for games to have a solo-friendly leveling experience. As much as we all dream of jumping into an MMO with our friends and leveling through the whole thing together, life just gets in the way. Most of us have either school, jobs, significant others, or a family, or some combination of the four that require varying amounts of our time. So let's circle back to the question at the beginning of the video. MMOs were more popular than ever when they forced us to play together, when they lacked dungeon finders and raid finders. But these days, MMOs are often built.
You've been going on and on about leveling. Dungeon finders, raid finders did not affect leveling in any way. Yet people still solo level 99% of the time. Obviously, that's just a number I pulled up, but it's like, it's true. Most people level alone.
With the solo player at the forefront of their.
It was the case before the raid finder, dungeon finder. It is still now the case. Yeah, you may run into someone who will maybe, do the quest with you. But even then, like back in the older days, back when like vanilla WoW and stuff, that wasn't a good thing. They would tag your monster and you couldn't get it. Like you just lost that kill for the quest, making you waste more time.
Design. Do MMOs attract?
You'd invite them to your group, but if they denied it, you're just like, oh man, this sucks.
Fewer players because of this change? Or do MMOs attract fewer players because we changed? WoW's population peaked at around 12 million current subscribers all the way back in 2010. It's been on the decline since, and no other MMO has even come close to reaching it.
We also don't really know the numbers, from what I understand, past Miss Pandaria. Who knows? Shadowlands could have been even higher just because they brought back, a lot of people thought they were going to bring Arthas back. So I mean, it's hard to say because the numbers really aren't available.
Its concurrent player base. Why is that? Is it due to switching the focus to the solo experience? I don't think so. The most successful MMOs today have the best solo content. I think we changed, so the MMOs had to follow suit. We were once okay with standing in town for an hour looking for a group. It was all new.
Yeah, because a lot of MMO players were kids.
And shiny, this whole going online and grouping with people from around the world. Most players had never really experienced that before, but the novelty wore off. The excitement of being able to log into a game and play it with other people wasn't new anymore and no longer outweighed the disappointment of standing in town looking for a group. And not only that, every week new online games were popping up that could also satisfy that same online desire. The only difference is they had you in a match in 5 minutes. Today, being subjected to an hour-long wait in town, trying to form a party in zone chat is a quit moment.
Jeez, even a 20-minute wait would be like, yeah, F this.
For most players. There's too many other options now.
10-minute
Too
wait
many
would
other
also be
multiplayer
kind of
games
high.
that will have you in a match in an instant. Some say
Where if you can't do other things in that 10 minutes,
MMOs are dead as a result, and I don't agree with that. Recent MMO launches have been insane. There are still millions of players looking for and hoping for an MMO to grab them the way that the genre once did. You saw it twice in the last year, with millions showing up for the launches of New World and Lost Ark. Neither of those games held on to all of their players, but there were a lot of reasons for that prevent those games from being indicators of a dead genre. Lost Ark's pay-to-win nature ensures that it will only ever see limited success here in the West, despite actually being a solid.
I really don't think that's what killed it for Lost Ark for a lot of players. I think it's the honing system is, it feels like you're wasting your time when you fail multiple times. And then there's also like a lot of the content that gives you the gear to upgrade your stuff is actually somewhat difficult. I mean, it's not like super hard, but it is difficult. And it's something you have to do on a daily basis. So it's like if you're a casual player just playing the game for fun, like that's just not fun. Or at least I would assume so for a lot of like normal players. For me, what got me was just, it felt like to keep up with people, I would have to like grind in a stupid amount. And that's what killed it for me.
Game and New World, it came out of the oven half-baked. It wasn't finished, but it's now making.
I feel like I'm too far from the mic. I'm gonna get closer.
MMOs did after their launches. It's hard focusing on that solo experience. It's completely revamped and fleshed out its questing experience so that you can follow the main quest chain all the way through the game. It also added a dungeon finder. It's realized that these are the things that most MMO players crave these days. Is all of this working for New World? In anticipation of all this new content,
yeah, I'm still waiting on New World. I don't know when I'll go back, but I most likely will.
40% in the last 30 days. Wait, scratch that. I just refreshed the page. Make that 46% in the last 30 days. Looks like their focus on the players without friends is starting to pay off. So has the solofication of MMOs ruined the genre? I don't think so. The developers didn't make MMOs solo. We did by gravitating towards the MMO that offered the stronger solo experiences. When I'm playing MMOs, most of my time is spent doing what
I mean, it's also a case where if there is no multiplayer stuff, then obviously that game's going to die as well. It's more like players, especially with newer, like other options, like you have games that give the option of when you want to queue up or not queue up, group up with other people. So it's like, if you're in an MMO, but you're not really feeling like playing with other people and dealing with that, you're going to go to play the other MMO that offers it. And then the more times you do that, the more invested you're going to be in that other MMO, thus leaving the one that didn't give you that option.
I want to do when I want to do it. I am literally one of the players taking advantage of the solo experience MMOs are now adding. I frequently tune into Asmongold, who has millions of people that would love to play with him, and see him doing the same thing. Whether it's farming mounts in WoW or grinding up his gathering levels in New World, he's also taking advantage of the solo opportunities. I think it's because it's nice to be able to go at your speed. Sometimes you just want a solo chill activity. When you're a content creator trying to keep up with children, or a dad trying to keep up with children, or students trying to keep up with class, the flexibility of having the solo content to dive into on those nights where you only have an hour or your friends aren't available, it makes all the difference when you're deciding what game to boot up. And as history shows, when one game offered the experience of standing in town trying to form a group and another offered anything else, we gravitated towards anything else. And worded like that, it's not so surprising, is it? I think the best thing MMOs can do now is have a ton of solo content waiting for us.
Well, the main thing with waiting in town and stuff, it's like, it wasn't really the social aspect that you lost. It was the, maybe you did lose a bit of social aspect, the social aspects, but you lost a huge time waster of just sitting in town doing nothing. That's really what it was, is people don't like wasting their time a lot less nowadays than they used to.
When we need it, and a ton of group content
because there's so many other options
when we want it. And that's the big difference. A lot of times when you're doing the solo content, it's because you need it. It's because there isn't really an option to do the group content at the moment because you don't have people available to do it, or you don't have,
or you don't want to go through the like headache of trying to find like an actual good group.
The time to do it. In conclusion, solo content didn't ruin the genre, it kept it relevant. We're just not willing to stand around town for hours at a time looking for groups anymore. There's too many other online games that can put us into a game instantly. What type of player are you? Are you the solo player or the group player or a little of both? If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe for more MMO content and to help out with Algorithm Senpai. I appreciate it. And if you agree or disagree, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your take on it.
Always throw a like on their videos.
These are just my
You gotta
ramblings,
actually
so
do
you're
it with
certainly
these.
welcome to disagree. And as always, a massive...
I mean, I do disagree with some of the things he said, but the overall like thing what he's talking about, I do agree with, in that solo play is like huge in MMOs. Like obviously you can't have an MMO with just solo play. That's not going to last most likely. But I think like a majority of the game should be soloable. Like obviously you should have like raids and stuff like that. But yeah. So that was Soloable MMOs by Lucky Ghost. And yeah, good video.